So last video of the year for me, and I thought I would focus on something which is quite good to think about this as we're about to enter a new year, which is how to practice well and how to practice regularly. And I want to share with you 5 things that help me with my own practice. One thing that really helps me, and I think this is because I'm a visual learner, is having a habit tracker. So in my diary, which sits on my desk, and I look at it a lot throughout the day, I've got this habit tracker where I've got the different things I want to do each day, and then I put a tick or a cross next to it whether I achieve it. And so practice is on there, and I want to see every box ticked if I can by the end of the week. I use this habit tracker to track my practice and also other things which are important to me, like exercise. Now there's something about, say you've done 4 days in a row and you've ticked that box 4 days in a row. There is something that really makes you want to be able to keep that streak going, if you like. So I find that very helpful. It doesn't need to be in a diary that you've bought. It could be just something you make up yourself on the computer or an app on your phone. But it certainly helps me think, right, I can see this week I've practiced 6 out of 7 days. I want to practice that 7th day too to complete the week. Now the second thing I do which helps me organise my practice and get the most from the time, as you can probably see that on my habit tracker, is that I divide my practice time up into practice and technique. And my basic aim is to do 30 minutes of technique practice, which I'll elaborate on in a second, and then a minimum of an hour's just general practice. Now that general practice will always be focused around repertoire, whether that's learning a new song, transcribing it, or it's maintaining an old song, memorizing it, so forth, just practicing it for performing it in preparation for gigging it, say. It just always focuses around that, because for me, if I pick up the guitar and practice and I don't play a song at some point during that, for me that doesn't feel like a good use of time. Now the technique practice is all about trying to ensure I can perform at a consistent level when doing gigs. I found at the back end of 2022, I did loads of gigs in December and I was super happy with where I was by the final gig of that leading up to Christmas. Really, I was like, this is the best I felt I've ever played. And then you go into the new year and gigs obviously are slower to come in January, less common, and it just feels like you're almost gone back a step or two and you feel sluggish and technique doesn't feel as strong. So what I ended up doing is deciding, right, I'm going to practice technique for half an hour a day, and that incorporates all things like scales, arpeggios, triads, other guitar techniques, octaves, you name it, playing different rhythms. It's not just as kind of laborious as just boring technique. I try and still focus it around songs, but the aim isn't about playing the song, it's about just maintaining and developing my technique. Often I find myself in those sessions, what I tend to do is I will pick a scale or a key, and I will work in that key, and I'll do different things with arpeggios and scales from that key, practicing different rhythms, different intervals, all sorts, and usually the last 5 minutes I'll just do free improvisation in that key, or sometimes I'll centre it around a song, but like practice different techniques and different musical concepts with it. Now I aim for a minimum of an hour and a half a day. The technique would never go over half an hour. If I've got more time, I'll either up that practice session, or quite often what I find myself doing is just I am transcribing everything Charlie Christian played. So, if I've got spare time, that's what I'm doing. The third thing that helps me practice regularly is having everything I need at hand. No, I don't have to open guitar cases, thankfully with the climate here, it's not an issue. I can just grab a guitar and pick it up. More often than not, I grab my L7 because I don't need to plug that in, it sounds great acoustically. I've got all the books, I've got a music stand where I need, I've got the computer with iReal Pro on if I need it, I've got pen and paper, metronome, it's all out and ready to go. I don't need to open any cases or do anything to start practicing. And if you've got to maybe tidy away some stuff, make some space, get a guitar out of a case, I don't know, you might have to go through several steps before you can actually practice. And if that's the case, I know what it's like. It's very easy to avoid that because you've got to do an X, Y, and Z first. It's certainly less appealing, it's less accessible if that's the case. So any way you can streamline how quickly you can get to practicing, then do it as much as possible. Whether that's setting up a dedicated space in your house to practice. If you can keep your guitars out based on where you live, then great. If not, certainly have an area ready to go ideally. The things you need, for me that's a music stand, definitely. It's obviously a guitar and a stand, and then any books or materials that you're using as well. The fourth thing that I find very helpful is when I start practicing, say if I'm doing my technique practice, I will get my phone or use my desktop and say to it, hey Siri, set a timer for 30 minutes, and then I am going to practice for those 30 minutes. I'm not going to get distracted, I am focused for those 30 minutes on just the task in hand, practicing and playing guitar.
30 minutes, starting now.
There we go. For me, that mindset of that is very different to just picking up the guitar casually to play. No, it's like, I'm going to sit down and practice this for half an hour. The fifth thing that helps me is I block out time in my diary to practice. Now, we've all got different commitments, different schedules, work and family, all the different kind of work-life balances. Of course, we're all different, but hopefully you're in a position where you're able to say, between now and then, I'm going to practice. Personally, I feel for those that are really busy, if you can, I think doing practice early in the morning is a greater likelihood that you're gonna get that practice done, rather than getting home from work and then thinking, oh, I've got to practice. Things just often get in the way, like, you know, you cook dinner, then maybe you feel a bit tired. It's quite easy to go a day without practicing if that's the case. So I was thinking, if I was working 9 to 5 regular job, I would personally do the practice first thing in the morning. Each week for me tends to differ in terms of what gigs I'm doing, where I'm being. Sometimes I might be traveling, sometimes I might have a quieter week and so forth. So I tend to look at each week case by case and just block out time where I can. Now obviously sometimes things get in the way, practice gets derailed. I recently went to Rome for a week and obviously no practice that entire week. I come back and I feel very rusty, or you know, other family commitments, or for me it's often traveling for gigs away for a weekend, and the practice is the gigs, if you like, quite often. So things get in the way, and you've got to accept that's going to happen. It's frustrating, but it's just part of the course. What's important is getting back into it and getting back into that regular rhythm of practice as soon as you can. And those strategies that I've just gone through have really helped me across the last year to practice regularly and to ensure that when I do practice, I get the most out of the time. Now, I hope you've had a good 2023. For me personally, it's been a bit of a mixed year. You know, many of you will know that my mum sadly passed away back in May. So for me, the first half of this year is, if I'm honest, a complete blur. I can't remember the first 5 or 6 months of this year, if I'm honest. But since then, there's been some really memorable gigs that I've been involved in that have been great fun. And genuinely, I have loved making these videos, and especially videos over on Patreon for you guys. And just a big thank you and my gratitude for those of you that have watched my videos, engaged with my content, commented, liked, and a special thanks to those of you that support me over on Patreon. It's greatly appreciated and I love doing it. My next video will be uploaded on the 1st of January. That will be the standard of the month for January, and patrons have voted for a classic swing tune, Stomping at the Savoy, so be sure to check that out. Just leaves me to say I hope you have a great 2024. Personally, looking ahead, I've done something I might regret, and that's sign up to a 10K run in March, and also 2 half marathons. And this is based on me just doing the local park run and enjoying that. But I think doubling the distance and then doubling it some more again, I might live to regret that decision. But anyway, I'll deal with that next year. Until next time, you take care.